significantly changed. Even the cost of the election is not the only one. There's so many reasoning behind the increased cost.
Yes.
So we want to break it down for our viewer tonight and tell them exactly why we have to move away from 2010 to 2013. So I'll do that by beginning with 2010. You can take
Great,
you
and I'll be seeing you later with sports news.
All right. And of course, as I mentioned with the case, the dynamics in this election have totally changed. Even the times have changed. It was 2010. We are now in 2021. We are going into 2022. So you don't expect things to remain the same. So let's begin with the 2010 referendum, because here is where it begins. What was the cost of the 2010 referendum that gave us the new constitution? It was 10 billion shillings. Now, the cost per voter at that time was about 794, just 6 shillings shy of the 800 shilling mark, and the number of registered voters at that time was just 12.6 million voters. And you will see that the number of voters have been increasing over time. So let's take you to the 2013 election that brought in Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. The cost of that election was 36 billion shillings. It's been increasing every year, and the cost per voter in 2013 was 2,500. The number of registered voters increased by about 2 million voters to 14.4 million voters in 2013. Let's look at 2017, 2018. This was a disputed election with a nullification from the Supreme Court. So the total amount, and we'll do this as a cumulative amount because of the repeat election on the 26th of October of November of that year, and the cost was cumulative to 60 billion shillings in that election, plus the repeat presidential election. The cost per voter went up with 46 shillings. And of course, the number of registered voters, as expected, also increased with about 5 million voters. And that is expected to happen again in the next general election. The IBC is projecting they'll add between 5 and 6 million votes at that time. Away from that, in 2022 general election, the projection I've been talking about, the IBC says we'll need additional amount of money first. We're registering new voters. So the total amount they're asking for from Parliament is 40.9 billion shillings. The cost per voter is 1,640. Now, this is significant because there has been a decrease with about 960 shillings, just 40 shillings shy of the 1,000 shilling mark, which is $10. So that's the decrease. The number of registered voters, as projected by the IBC, will have to go up to 25 million voters. Of course, you expect the people who are turning 18 years old, they'll be voting first-time voters, second-time voters, and the people who've never registered, who've been sitting on the fence, are registering for 2022 general election. It's a transition election. You expect that to happen. So the IBC is asking for 40.9 million shillings. All right, as I mentioned, Kenya is the third highest in terms of the cost of an election. So how much is the average cost? 2,500 shillings per voter. Multiply that with about 25 million voters, you get an average of 1,600 shillings per voter. That's the average cost of an election in Kenya. Let's move on, because soon we are doing a comparative study with other nations. Now, this is it. Forget about the region first. Let's talk about the highest. This is the US. The average cost that they spend per voter is about 9,350. Followed by Papua New Guinea, which is about 6,000, and then Kenya sits there at $25, which is about 2,500 shillings if you multiply by 100. Right now, the exchange rate is about 110. Away from that, we look at the region, because Kenya is top in Africa, actually. And how much do we spend? Let's go across the borders to Rwanda. 2017 election. This data is based on the 2010 election. 2017 statistics. 2017. Rwanda used about an equivalent of 750 million shillings, 250 million shy of the 1 billion mark. This is Kenya shillings. The cost per voter in Rwanda, this is not a surprise, with the way they manage their country, 116. Well, still a young country, 1994. You know what happened? So Rwanda spends 116 per voter. Let's look at TZ, across the border once again. And the last election, with the late Magufuli, these are the statistics. 2010 election, they used about 800 million shillings, 200 million less the 1 billion mark. This is in Kenyan shillings. The cost per voter in TZ was 568. Still crossing the borders now. Let's take you to Uganda. How much do they spend in their election? Uganda in 2016, as I said, this is based on 2017. They used an equivalent of Kenyan shillings, 1.3 billion shillings. Cost per voter is about 400 in Uganda at that time. And in 2021, the cost per voter went a little high with about 800 shillings to to 1,200. But still, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda are still lower than Kenya. Kenya is billions and billions of shillings. And of course, the cost drivers, this is most important. The IBC is making a case to the reason why they require more money every election cycle. You will be surprised with some reasons, some won't surprise you. The first one, temporary officials wage bill. Now, these are the people who are just hired during the election. How much does the IBC spend on them? About 6 billion, or that is the budget the IBC intends to spend on them. The election clerks, the polling clerks, all those people who serve you when you go there, the security, the food, all this, they say it's about 6 billion. The temporary staff that are not permanent in the secretariat, 6 billion. Now, the ballot papers, the budget alone is also about 6 billion. Now, compare 6 billion for ballot papers and 6 billion for the temporary staff. They are going parallel, and of course they say election technology, and yet we are still very manual. That's why we walk to the polling booth and cast a vote. We don't do it online, but they're still saying that technology that is still very manual is 4.5 billion shillings. Well, there are other costs. I say some will surprise you, some won't. So the late planning, they say if we plan late, we don't do procurement in time, then we're going to pay more. That's also a reason. Increased polling stations. This was in law. They say that about each polling station must have about 700. The last election, I think about 49 or 53, I'm not so sure. But they're saying with the 25 million projected or 6 million increased, then they're saying it will increase. So this will definitely drive the cost up. We'll be taking it up with the panel. And political interference, politicians trying to cut them. They say funds curtailed by election and delayed disbursement of funds. If you delay to give us funds, obviously that's going to happen. I have not told you about a cost that is very important. They have the lawyers' cost because they budget for it. Like I think they're asking for about 3-point-something billion shillings just to pay the lawyers, just in case there are disputes in the election and it goes to court. The IBC needs its lawyers. So how much? About 3 billion for the lawyers. Well, we'll be taking this discussion forward with the panel. They're already seated. We'll be speaking to them. But Akisa Wadera will be back here with the sports. But first, let's take a short break on Kivumbi 2022. We'll be right back.